Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, November 6th in the beautiful Memorial Arena. I'd like to thank our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. In this segment, we're going to be talking to Corey Levine and Dr. Adrian Fine of the group Independent Jewish Voices, IJV. Welcome to both of you. And we'll start off with Corey. Corey, what is IJV?
Good afternoon, Jack. IJV is a national Jewish organization with 9 chapters across Canada, spanning from Victoria to Halifax. And we are a group of Jews who support the Palestinian cause and are working to ensure that that human rights for all peoples of Israel and Palestine are adhered to.
So Adrian, how is IJV different than other groups that support the Palestinians?
There are very many organizations that support Palestinian human rights, and mainstream Judaism says that it speaks for all Jews in Canada, but we are the only one of those organizations that is Jewish. So we are independent Jewish voices. The Canadian Jewish Congress and other organizations don't speak for all Jews. The second point that's worth mentioning is that many people throw the word anti-Semitism onto any organizations or people who argue against Israeli policies. They can't throw that accusation to us because we are Jewish.
Okay. Corey, what are the main issues that IJV is fighting for?
So we want the application of international law applied to the conflict. Too often, Israel gets away with violating various laws, and we also want that human rights for all peoples, whether you are Palestinian or Israeli, that it shouldn't matter who you are, what you are, that you should have equal human rights. And those are the 2 main points that embody the principles of our organization.
So, Adrian, if those are the things you're fighting for, what are the obstacles to achieving it?
There are many major obstacles. First, there are over 500,000 Jewish settlers now who've colonized the West Bank. And they are all right-wing settlers who believe that they're doing God's work by occupying and living in this, what they believe to be holy land. There's the blind support by the diaspora Jews for basically all Israeli policies. And the lobby groups are immensely powerful in North America. And that has led the governments of the United States and Canada to be almost unanimous in always voting for Israeli policies or vetoing any United Nations United Nations movement to chastise Israel. There's also a degree of Islamophobia that's always been there to some extent, but markedly worse post 9/11. So these are very major obstacles. And one other is the amazing propaganda power of Israel and its pro-Israeli supporters in North America.
So Corey, it's always said, at least in the media, that people who are critical of Israel and Israeli policies are being anti-Semitic. Being critical of Israel is anti-Semitic. What's IJV's response to that?
This is the most common way to shut down any kind of debate around Israel-Palestine or any kind of criticism of Israel. And we are here, Adrian and myself and IJV as a whole, to say speaking out against Israel, Israeli policies is absolutely not anti-Semitic. We are here to speak out as Jews And therefore, because we are Jewish, it's hard to give us that label that we are anti-Semitic. Most of all of us are proud to be Jewish, but we feel it incumbent upon ourselves, because we are Jewish, to speak out. We feel that this is a ploy to deflect any kind of criticism of Israel. And saying that you're anti-Semitic would be like, and a good analogy would be apartheid era South Africa. And to say that someone speaking out against apartheid would be to say, oh, they're just anti-Afrikaner. Makes as much sense as to say that someone speaking out against Israel and the occupation is anti-Semitic.
Well, I agree, but it's certainly out there, and yeah, interesting. I think it's gone down, though, that feeling. I think it's much more, people are much more able to criticize Israel now, in part because of the work that you guys are doing. Adrian, one big question or issue is a peace process, a one-state or a two-state solution. Should there be an Israel and a Palestine, or should there be one nation?
So we are often asked that at various presentations that we make, or we have guest speakers, like, what is the solution? We don't propose a solution. It could be one state or two state. That is not part of Independent Jewish Voices. We are basically talking about whatever solution is found, it must guarantee equal human rights for all peoples in that area. And so we don't get involved in actual political policies. We obviously have to be versant in what makes Israel decide on this, that, and the other, but we do not propose an individual solution. Within our organization, there's a wide spectrum of belief as to which is the right solution. And so we don't have an official party line. But we do say there must be human rights for everyone.
And do you think it's possible to move forward to that from where we are now?
Every day you pick up a newspaper, or every week, you read of things that make it sound less and less likely. And when you actually visit Israel and you see the wall, and you talk to people and you read the newspapers, with one exception, Haaretz, which speaks exactly the way we do. It says this is wrong, human rights have been abrogated. You realize that it's almost impossible to think of a solution, but that's up to the politicians and the world leaders to actually come up with.
And the people who are there.
And the people who are there, both sides, of course.
Corey, Israel says that the greatest threat to the existence of Israel is the possession of nuclear weapons by Iran. What's IJV's position on that?
First of all, I think it's incredibly important to point out that Israel is, in fact, a nuclear power. So when Israel starts to talk about Iran having nuclear weapons, it doesn't even mention that it has its own nuclear weapons program that is largely hidden from view. We also think that it is yet another ploy by Israel to deflect criticism away from its own policies, its own nuclear weapons program, and to try and, it's the most effective way when you are guilty of something, is to try and put the spotlight onto someone else. And this is what we feel that Israel is doing by always mentioning that Iran is a nuclear power.
It's interesting to me that the U.S. government, the Canadian government, and the media are always pushing that same line, that Iranian, I mean, I'm against everything nuclear, but how can the Americans possibly criticize anyone for anything when they've got thousands of
Absolutely right. There is very little likelihood that Iran would be foolish enough to brook its own potential destruction by using its nuclear weapons.
But at least it could protect itself by having them from an attack.
Yeah.
Adrian, there's a lot of talk about a boycott of Israeli products the same way as there was a boycott of South Africa. What's IJV's position on that?
IJV is in favor of a boycott of Israeli products. We feel that recent history has shown that boycotts do have an effect. They definitely had a long-term effect in South Africa, and they're very probably having a significant effect in Iran, that Iran is now facing the economic consequences and may well have to change its own nuclear policies. We were a major supporter and gave lots of information to the United Church of Canada, who within the last year decided to boycott all produce coming from the occupied territories. And so we regard that as a major success. And we are working quite strongly for a boycott of SodaStream, which has its factories in the occupied territories, and that's quite against international law.
I'm sorry, a boycott of?
SodaStream. It's a soft drink.
Oh, okay.
No, it's a container that which you make fizzy drinks from, like soda water and Coke-like products.
How's that going? Is the boycott succeeding in anywhere in the world, or
no?
having
But
an
there's
impact?
lots of places, like in Europe. Just a few weeks ago, Europe decided that any product coming from the occupied territories must be labeled that this is from the occupied territories, which are not part of Israel proper. And this caused huge consternation in Israel. They're appealing it, but the mood is that something needs to be actually enforced to make Israel think again about continuing the huge support, financial and otherwise, for people to settle illegally against international law in the occupied territories.
It's very interesting that you'd think there would be more coverage in the media of your points of view, because it's very newsworthy, very interesting. So let's get a little bit more local here. Why do you think the Harper government is Israel's best friend?
Oh, that is such a critical question, and one that should be on the minds of Canadians when they go to the ballot box. I don't know the answer for sure. I can only speculate. The current configuration of the Conservative Party is that it has a very strong Christian fundamentalist base. I think that is one reason. Another reason is that the pro-Israeli lobby has been very effective with the Conservative Party. And as you point out, the mainstream media is also very pro-Israeli. It's very difficult for IJV to get our voice out there in the mainstream media. They like to portray the Jewish voice as being monolithic, and that monolithic voice is completely uncritical of Israel, its policies, and to have an alternative viewpoint and try and get that into the mainstream media is a challenge.
Adrian, we're down to the last couple of questions. Some say that the situation in Israel and Palestine is what it should be. The Arab people and the Palestinian people got what they deserved because they are the warmongers. What's IJV's position on that?
Well, history has a very interesting way that years after original history, people look and see documents that really cast a doubt on the conventional historical description of events. There is no doubt whatsoever that the original creation of the State of Israel dispossessed many Arabs, hundreds of thousands of them, of the property that they'd lived in on for generations. Then, of course, it was the War of Independence and the fleeing from Palestinian territory of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The official historical Israeli description of this is they fled of their own accord. But in fact, even right-wing historians who now are able to examine the documents from 1948 reveal that and admit that a huge number of those people were forced out, not because they were holding rifles and shooting Israelis, they were actually cleared out of these villages. And 140 villages in that war, Arab villages, were flattened and they ceased to exist. So history really is a little bit more on the side of the Arabs than many North Americans want to admit. And then we had the famous war, the Six-Day War in 1967. And I remember as a student there, glued to the television, thinking that, my goodness, Israel is going to be driven out to sea and it will be eradicated. In fact, recent documents and descriptions by Moshe Dayan, who was the Minister of Defense, show conclusively that there was no one high up in Israel who had any fear about that war because they had overwhelming military superiority in spite of the Arabs having huge numbers of tanks more than the Israelis did. So Israel started that war, and the official party line has been they had to do that. But in fact, history and examination of documents show that they actually didn't have to. They were not under the threat of all of the propaganda that was coming from the Arab side. So I think one should look at history a little bit more balanced.
And that same story has been fed to us for the last 65 years, I guess.
That's right.
So two people from independent Jewish voices, Dr. Adrian Fine and Corey Levine, thank you both very much for coming on, and thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 2 of Citizens Forum. Thanks again to our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff. This segment is the Walter and Jack Show, and we always talk about, I guess, the world's news from our own points of view. There was a letter to the editor. This is Wednesday, November 6th, we're doing this, and there was a letter to the editor in today's Times columnist. It was talking about the Malahat, but it talked about photo radar. And, you know, I think people know that my take on media is that the media is one of the greatest enemies of everything positive in Canada, or so many positive things in Canada. And so this is a letter to the editor, and it says, I'll just quote, he's talking about photo radar. He says, photo radar did nothing to end fatalities and serious injuries. So this is what the Times columnist chooses to print in a letter to the editor. They know that's not true, but they print it, and people read it, and if you don't know the numbers, and nobody does, people think it's true. Once again, this is what the Times columnist chooses to print, and they do this every day of the year. All the corporate media, the television, the radio, the newspapers, they give us misinformation to promote a corporate agenda. And here again, photo radar, he says, was a cash grab. Photo radar did nothing to end fatalities and serious injuries. Now, years ago, when photo radar was in, Walter and I actually went to ICBC and got the numbers. And what we found was, I don't remember exactly, there were 100 fewer deaths a year a couple of years after photo radar was implemented. I remember photo radar slowing down this city and making it much more drivable. 100 fewer deaths a year, and that means thousands fewer injuries. I don't remember if it went from 800 down to 700 or 500 down to 400. I just don't recall. But for the Times columnist to print that kind of, I mean, I remember the radio stations just going after photo radar. Nothing is allowed to impede the automobile and the oil industry. You want to kill people by driving fast, you go right ahead, and the media will support you.
Yeah, it seemed to be the problem is because I drive a service van every day, and I don't think you ever got nailed for photo radar, but I saw them all over the place. And what bugged me was in the high traffic areas, like along Pat Bay Highway or the Malahat, in really problem areas, they should have photo radar. Slow people down, particularly in those areas when they're really driving too fast for road conditions, wet or dry. The people just traditionally have driven too fast in those areas. The cameras slowed the traffic down. That was a great idea. Where they had them placed in other areas where you could speed a little safely, actually, and clickety-click, the photo radar was picking up a lot of people. That was really upsetting them. So I think they used it incorrectly sometimes, and they might have used it a little bit like a cash cow because of doing that, where you could easily trap people in some stretches. But there's no doubt it saved lives, and it was a good policy and a good program. And of course, you say the media, for whatever reason they had, went against it. But it was saving lives.
And anyways, let's move on. There was a couple of things you wanted to talk about. I can't remember what they were, so let's have the first one.
Well, just on that topic a little further about driving. What's the #1 cause of accidents in North America now, Jack?
Alcoholism, I guess, or...
No, guess what? It's what they're calling distracted driving. Distracted driving means using cell phones while driving. Yeah, it's now the #1 cause of accidents in North America, the #1 single cause. Okay. And, you're talking about death and destruction and pain and suffering.
Yeah.
We're talking now, thousands and thousands of lives being lost.
Yeah.
And, by the way, they're really doing not much about it. The thing is about the cell phone issue in driving is what they dare not talk about is that the cell phone radiation actually impairs brain function. That's been shown scientifically over and over again. When you got a cell phone held to your head, or even if you're using text messaging or hands-free, Bluetooth, whatever you want in the car, the radiation levels are up quite high, and it actually impedes brain function. You just can't operate the car safely anymore. Split seconds saves lives in automobiles. A delay of 1 second of stepping on the brake is the difference between killing somebody and not. And because the corporate media, in my view, and the main medical associations, let's say, and their main worldview is that this type of radiation doesn't impede brain function, therefore they do nothing. And that talking about photo radar, that is really unfortunate. But on the scale that they're allowing death and destruction on the roads now, with drivers using wireless devices, it is really unheard of.
So here in BC, you can't use a cell phone, but you can use I don't even know what they call it.
Hands-free and Bluetooth and all that. Yeah. The problem with it, Jack, is
Are there other jurisdictions that have banned the use of everything?
Boy, I couldn't say. But the problem with the hands-free, by the way, in the scientific data, if anybody cares to look at it, is hands-free drivers are having more accidents than the people that are holding the phones.
Well, just how, I just wonder, how was it ever allowed in the first place for, what kind of craziness? Yeah, I'm going to start talking on the phone while I'm driving, and all the authorities say, oh yeah, that's okay. The only way I can see that happening, really, is a lot of pressure from a very, very big and powerful industry that wanted to allow anybody who bought one of their phones to basically endanger the lives of everybody around them. Because that's what it is. Otherwise, laws would have been put in place immediately to not allow it, no Bluetooth, no nothing, and people would have been used to that. Instead, we've had for years now, it's been okay, and people don't want to change.
I think we should talk about this further in a future show, and I'll bring in some more material that will show that hands-free drivers are causing more accidents than handheld. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, and based upon the data, is that because there's more radiation in the car with the Bluetooth and with the hands-free devices. And if you have more radiation, you have more brain malfunction, you have more car accidents. It's a direct relationship. We're not talking about that. So, I mean, at what lengths will they go not to talk about the real causes of harm?
Moving on, I
Okay.
wanted to talk about what I think is a direction we might consider going in regarding basically the economy and our society as well, and that's social democracy. And I sent you an email about a week ago. I said, you know, I've always been a fan of social democracy, but what does it mean? And I have no idea what it means, but you know, it has a meaning to me. What I see social democracy being is more democratic, so people have a bigger voice in the main directions, big and small, that the country is going in. That's the democracy part. And the social part is there's more of a government presence in the marketplace in competition with the corporate entrance into the marketplace, because that's the way it used to be, and I think we were actually better off because of it. We were convinced 30 years ago that, not convinced, the corporations took over and they told us government is out and we're going to run everything, and if we see where that's led us, it's not to a very good place, both economically or societally. Now governments themselves have become so corrupt that, you know, the thought of government intervention in the marketplace isn't what it used to be. But if we had more democratic governments, I think then I would like to see the result of what would happen if like if we had a bank that was competing with the corporate banks. I mean, you know, a bank that had branches and was out there. Maybe they could give us a better deal. Why not an oil company? We used to have Petro-Canada. Maybe, you know, maybe a Canadian oil company would do better for us, although we've got to completely move away from oil. Maybe a Walmart, dare I say it, a Canadian Walmart?
Well, the thing is, Jack, I mean, how about just getting somewhere in the middle? I don't think those are really bad ideas, but how about just regulating the marketplace? How about just, you know, creating an environment in which it's fair for the consumers and for the people who are manufacturing? Right now, there isn't any real regulation going on. We're getting food from China that's laced with all sorts of poisons. We got food coming up from Mexico and California that is loaded with pesticides and chemicals. We can't find out whether or not we're eating genetically modified organisms. There's no labeling. Look, these are just standard things that we should have. Our government is going to act on our behalf for the better, for our health and safety. We're not asking for a communist state. We're just saying, no, let's have something that's fair. And the only thing we have, you know, that buffers us from a full-out corporate state is some type of a social democracy concept. Canadians fit so well into this. We all desperately want to have fairness. You know, it's not such a strange idea. I'm willing to give up a few of my individualistic ideas and things that I want to do for the betterment of the society. Everybody feels that way. So it's not such a strange idea. And we're just being kind of fed that, you know, the government just has to be out of this and not regulate. Well, we see where this is taking us. It's disastrous. You know, we're really destroying our economy by not managing it, basically.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think it's a direction Canada and Canadians might be interested in looking at. Now, here we are at you know, we're not even out of the starting gate, and the corporations are 100 yards down the field or 100 meters down the field. But still, we've got to start. I don't know how. I mean, the corporations own the media. They control our governments. They have, it seems, total control of our society. Somehow, I mean, as we were saying, we don't even know what social democracy means, but democracy sounds good, and social sounds good. So, you know, I think we can have some positive outcomes from it.
Sure.
Next on your agenda.
What do I have on my agenda?
was
Oh, by the way, I want to talk
Oh, yes.
about a great film that's just been made by a Canadian filmmaker. I'm just going to hold this up. It's called Take Back Your Power. And if you thought that you know, utility smart meters were a good idea, that they're going to save you money, that they're going to protect your privacy, and the radiation from these devices was not going to harm your health, if you really think that, and you're really sure of it, I recommend you watch this film, because you're going to see another side of the story. A very, very serious examination, a very thoughtful examination of the social and political and environmental consequences of this type of technology, and just how devastating this type of technology is for the general population. It's very, very important, I think, for everybody to see this. You can go to a website, which I'll quote, and maybe the guys will get it up on the screen. It's called stopsmartmeters.ca, and you can watch this film for $4.95, and it's with PayPal or use your Visa, or you can purchase the film and have it delivered to your door in about a week. Very important film. I think this is going to be groundbreaking, and I think it's going to win some awards when the public starts seeing it.
You've watched it?
Oh yeah, I've seen it several times.
How long is it?
An hour and 45 minutes.
Okay, what is the number one scary or interesting or whatever point that it makes?
Well,
if you can
there's
remember.
so much in it, but if you just watch the first 5 minutes, and you'll see these hearings are happening in Maine, and these judges are sitting and interviewing a utility spokesperson about the safety of the technology.
Judges are interviewing him.
Yeah, some type of tribunal or something. I'm not sure about it, but they're just saying, they're asking the guy, is this technology safe or not? And basically, the utility company will not take a position on whether it's safe or not. They will not say that the technology is safe.
Are they testifying under oath here?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so they won't say it's safe.
They won't say it's safe, and these panel is saying, well, you're just foisting this onto the public, and you will not, will not take responsibility for its safety. That's how the movie starts, and then it gets on to the real issues and the background of this worldwide rollout of this type of technology. Very, very serious consequences. It's a surveillance style technology. You can't get around it. When this is up and running, all your appliances in your house are going to be sending signals to the meter on your wall outside, telling the meter when your appliances are on and off, and of course the meter itself, the consumption meter, will be sending that data to command control, which is who knows where, by the way. It's a BC Hydro perhaps, but that data, once it's collected, is sent and can be used by third parties, and it's stored forever. Your consumption habits are now being stored continuously, 24/7, forever.
And wirelessly, so it's definitely,
The health
negative
consequences
health-wise as
are
well.
all obvious too.
Let's move on to the issue of fracking. Now, Christy Clark is out of control. I mean, this person is pushing, and it's not her. I mean, she's just a puppet. She's a corporate puppet. But she controls the provincial government. I'm not saying the NDP would be any better. They support fracking too. But this is a poisonous technology. They take huge amounts of water, poison it with chemicals, pump it into the ground, poison the ground, blow up rock, and get out oil and natural gas, which then contributes to climate change. People are being poisoned by this industry everywhere, and Christy Clark is basing our entire future on it. This province is completely out of control, and if we, the citizens of British Columbia, cannot take it back, and I mean, where do we even start? I mean, this is poisoning our water and poisoning our land. You know, here we are in 2013. Is this the best we can do? Can we not stop these people? I mean, they have declared war on us. The corporations have declared war on us. They control our governments. They control the politicians. They own the media. And if we can't stop them, they're going to kill us all. And that's not an exaggeration, given what's going on right now with Fukushima, which was another completely corporate industry that they assured us was going to be safe, and they didn't care.
Well, you know, Christy Clark said she was going to have these several conditions that would have to be met before she'd begin approving these pipelines.
And that's the oil pipeline.
Oil pipeline deal. And I thought you were going to start talking about that, but the fracking, of course, is terrible. But, you know, nobody believed her. I didn't believe her. Everybody knew that as soon as the election was over, that something new was going to pop up. And all of a sudden, they've had these negotiations, all the conditions have been met, and now it's all being left up to the federal government to decide whether or not it's safe environmentally. But nobody really believed what she was saying. But of course, we're looking around looking for somebody to believe and somebody to be in opposition, like perhaps the NDP. You know, and this is to me was such the rip-off of the century, was that the NDP were not really going after her in the way they should have. And you know, and she's getting away with it. Now Adrian Dix and others are complaining about it right now and saying she's changed her position. But that would only mean if you actually believe what she said in the first place. I don't think she's ever changed the position. They're always going to allow this to happen. You know, if you elect a Liberal government, you're going to get this pipeline. Everybody knew that. You know, so all the NDP had to do was just do a few little things that were half honest in their campaign. And they could have won this election. They could have opposed fracking or could have opposed smart meters. Newfoundland, by the way, has a moratorium on fracking. It's not such a wild idea.
Yeah, just to repeat that, Newfoundland has just put a moratorium on fracking. Is this big news in this province? Not barely mentioned. Quebec has a moratorium on fracking.
That's right.
I think at least several American states have moratoriums on fracking. But here, it's the way of the future. We're under corporate control, and they're going to kill us.
Well, we don't need fracking. The world is awash in natural gas. We don't have to develop this. It's not like we're into an emergency situation. We can do just fine without it. So this is what really always gets me is right now we're so stuck here in BC because we don't have a real opposition party.
And we don't have a direction to go in. Where's the positive direction? Social democracy.
Exactly, and you
Whatever
know,
it is.
we have a new Democratic Party that declares themselves to be social democratic, but they're not. You know, we have a Green Party that claims that they're protecting the environment, but they're not ecologists. They're off into some little tangent about carbon credits and global warming and using terminology that nobody relates to. They don't talk about the real social issues, that the real fundamental corruption that's happening in society that we have to change.
But if they did talk about it, well, you know what? You're right. They could. The media won't report it, but there's no reason they aren't in the community giving talks, appearing on community television, speaking out.
That's
Why
right.
are they so silent, all of them?
Forge ahead here. I mean, somebody has to do it. We have elected officials. Why don't, you know, we have representatives in these parties. Why not?
Yeah. Why don't they represent us?
Yeah, you know, we're just in such a bad spot here because there's nobody going to bat for us.
Yeah. 1 minute left, 30 seconds left. Finish us off here, Walter.
Well, I mean, we left last week, you know, and it's kind of a down note. And we're always examining these issues and always feeling so frustrated. But I always tell people, get involved. The NDP, get renewed. There's always a chance you're going to get somebody that's a better leader than the last. you know, people have to get back involved in the process and not give up at all, but just get out there and get active themselves.
Thank you, Walter.
Very welcome, Jack.
Thanks for watching Citizens Forum.